Top 7 well-known historical legends that are all lies. Separating fact-based history from fake history is an ongoing challenge, with politics and culture continuously affected by incorrect or exaggerated narratives and outright lies about the past. Here, journalist and author Otto English opines 3 historical untruths that he considers to have had a big impact on society. For many of us, history is a bit like a stew. A hot pot of nutritious 5-a-day facts, the cabbage of half-recalled school lessons, the comforting numbers of family sagas and the tasty offcuts of myth. Add in the dark gravy of good stories, so beloved of us all, and it can be very hard indeed to divine what is fact-based history and what is fake history. It's not always problematic. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter whether your auntie saw the Beatles at the Cavern Club in 1960, or whether she confused them with the swinging blue jeans. Nor is it hugely consequential that chicken tikka masala wasn't invented in Glasgow, or that Sir Walter Raleigh never threw down his coat in a puddle for Queen Elizabeth I. But the big stuff matters, because false and alternative narratives of empire, war and slavery evermore inform our political discourse. Those notions arguably fed the rise of President Donald Trump in the US, both sides of the Brexit debate in the UK, and the mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic in various parts of the globe. We also see it in Xi Jinping's China, in the Scottish independence movement, and in the ongoing and to many, tiresome culture wars. 7. Britain was a small, underdog nation that could have lost the Second World War. You might reasonably imagine that our grasp of recent history like the Second World War is better than almost anything else. After all, many of us know people who lived through it, and there is an almost endless cycle of documentaries and films on our TV screens that have familiarized us with the key events of 1939-45. The Second World War still matters in Britain. After all, we are all told that 1940 was our darkest hour, and the idea still defines our collective national psyche. Most of us have been raised on the tale. In May 1940, France fell. Following the evacuation of the British Expeditionary Force from Dunkirk, with help from the little ships, Britain faced down the might of Hitler's war machine until Russia and the US pitched up to help. In the meantime, the so-called Blitz spirit saw everyone through, the indomitable courage that still keeps our spirits up in times of peril. We know the speeches by heart, and posters of the era decorate our offices. When terrorist attacks or pandemics encroach on our lives, we tell each other to keep calm and carry on. The Battle of Britain is a cracking story, a sort of 20th century David and Goliath but with cups of tea, air raid wardens and Spitfires in place of slingshots, Philistines and stones. But many Britons persist in fundamentally misunderstanding it. For a start, Britain in 1940 wasn't barely held together. It was a global superpower, capable of pulling on vast resources and men. And while Dunkirk was a disaster, we were never really in any imminent threat of invasion. At the start of the Battle of Britain, the RAF and Luftwaffe were fairly matched. By July, the British were outproducing German aircraft by 2-1. The British had the first advanced integrated radar system in the world, and, courtesy of code breakers, were capable of reading Enigma decrypts from August 1940 onwards. They also had the benefit of fighting in their own skies and lost half the number of pilots suffered by the enemy, many of whom were killed or captured. As for a German invasion of Britain, well, even Hitler never really considered it feasible. The Royal Navy was the most powerful maritime force in the world. The idea that a seaborne invasion made up of converted barges could slip beneath the nose of the Royal Navy is something akin to fantasy. Indeed, German military commander Alfred Jodl said it would be like sending men into a mincing machine. Wartime propaganda exaggerated the level of threat and, subsequently, millions of us have continued to buy into the story. Unfortunately, that has bolstered British notions of self-reliance and exceptionalism, the idea we stood alone in 1940 so we don't need anyone else now. 6. Ancient people thought the earth was flat. Ask a selection of friends when they think people first began accepting that the world was round. If they're like those who I asked while researching my book, you'll tend to get a cluster of answers that place it somewhere between the 15th and 17th centuries. In part, that's because many of us still believe that one of the reasons that Christopher Columbus headed west in 1492 was to prove that the Earth was round. This was not the case. Proving that the Earth was a globe wasn't a priority because, in 1492, the vast majority of people knew that already. Indeed, as far back as the 5th century BC, Aristotle and others were already trying to work out its circumference. However, the fact that so many people think otherwise is largely the fault of the American writer Washington Irving, who in 1828 produced a hagiography of Columbus that cemented the Italian explorer as the discoverer of America, despite there already being some 60 million people living there while attempting to prove that the earth was round. Many regard Columbus as a terrible person, and the truth is that he wasn't a much better sailor. Having miscalculated the size of the Earth by about 25%, when he arrived in the Caribbean he thought he was off the coast of China, or somewhere east of Japan. His subsequent treatment of everyone he came into contact with was so brutal that he was eventually arrested by the Spanish authorities and sent back to Europe in chains. And yet, despite being as dreadful a sailor as he was a human being, Columbus came to be seen by millions of North Americans as the super smart explorer who founded their continent. Statues were raised, books were written, films were made, and for 200 years Washington Irving's Columbus was the only version on offer. Attempts to place the actual, historical Columbus in context have long met opposition. In October 2020, Donald Trump attacked the radical activists who talked of the great man's failings. Many would rather we believe in unifying, but fundamentally false, myths that distort our understanding of the past and the people in it because it serves the narrative better, one of bold and insightful European sailors bringing light to the dark corners of the earth, while proving that it was round. Such thinking shapes us all. 3. The royal family as German families excel at spin, forging tribal narratives about who we are and where we came from. We want our ancestors to be interesting, but we also want them to fit the narratives we have about ourselves. So that Irish forebear accounts for our charm and wit. So that great aunt who went to Oxford explains our passion for mathematics. So those relatives who fought in either World War are heroes or victims. In the process, an awful lot of people get left on the cutting room floor. The whole distorts our view of ourselves and informs our past. We tag our relatives onto the big events of history and appropriate their memories on platforms like Facebook. Sometimes, the family history of others is weaponized and distorted. It happened with birther narrative, questions about Barack Obama in the mid-2010s, and for the last 200 years, many have sought to discredit the British monarchy by claiming that they are a bunch of Germans and therefore somehow not wholly legitimate. The notion stretches back to the Sophia Naturalization Act of 1705 and the subsequent arrival of a Hanoverian-born king on the British throne in 1714, who was crowned George I. Ancestry is frequently an exercise in confirmation bias. It reinforces cultural and social divides and shapes the way we think about ourselves rather than celebrating our interconnected family trees. The aristocrat who comforts themselves that they are descended from William the Conqueror is likely descended from whoever scrubbed his undergarments as well. But who likes to boast about that? 4. Cleopatra. According to history, Cleopatra VII ruled ancient Egypt as co-regent, first with her father, then with her two younger brothers and finally with her son, for almost 3 decades. She was part of a dynasty of Macedonian rulers founded by Ptolemy, who served as general under Alexander the Great during his conquest of Egypt in 332 BC. Well-educated and clever, Cleopatra could speak various languages and served as the dominant ruler in all 3 of her co-regencies. Her romantic liaisons and military alliances with the Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, as well as her supposed exotic beauty and powers of seduction, earned her an enduring place in history and popular myth. I believe that many people mention Cleopatra, they must think of a stunning appearance. In addition to the ultimate beauty, there is amazing wisdom. Cleopatra also gives people a sense of mystery. But you know what? If Cleopatra looks at it from the perspective of modern people, it is likely to be an ugly woman. According to the British Times report, Cleopatra is about 150 centimeters or less than 160 centimeters tall, and his obese fat body, neck full of extra flesh, teeth are not good, has reached the point where you have to find a dentist. Moreover, the British National Museum also specially exhibits 11 statues of queens, which look ordinary, and British scientists have also restored Cleopatra's appearance through modern restoration technology. After the restoration of the photo, it can be seen that Cleopatra really looks very ordinary, and there is a certain gap with beauty. So why did she attract and conquer the Roman emperor? Don't forget that what is more rare than beauty is wisdom. She has a rare wisdom of ordinary women, which is also her unique charm. 3. Trojan Horse. Trojan Horse, huge hollow wooden horse constructed by the Greeks to gain entrance into Troy during the Trojan War. The horse was built by Appius, a master carpenter and pugilist. The Greeks, pretending to desert the war, sailed to the nearby island of Tenedos, leaving behind Sinon, who persuaded the Trojans that the horse was an offering to Athena, goddess of war, that would make Troy impregnable. Despite the warnings of Laocoon and Cassandra, the horse was taken inside the city gates. That night Greek warriors emerged from it and opened the gates to let in the returned Greek army. The story is told at length in Book 2 of the Aeneid and is touched upon in the Odyssey. The term Trojan horse has come to refer to subversion introduced from the outside. Beginning in the late 20th century, the name, Trojan horse, was applied to deceptively benign computer codes that seem like legitimate applications but are written to damage or disrupt a computer's programming or to steal personal information. In the Trojan slaughter, the Greek coalition forces defeated by hiding their soldiers in Trojan horses, and the story was adapted into various film and television works many times. But in fact, this is not a true story, just an ancient Greek legend. 2. Bermuda Triangle. The area referred to as the Bermuda Triangle, or Devil's Triangle, covers about 500,000 square miles of ocean off the southeastern tip of Florida. When Christopher Columbus sailed through the area on his first voyage to the New World, he reported that a great flame of fire, probably a meteor, crashed into the sea one night and that a strange light appeared in the distance a few weeks later. He also wrote about erratic compass readings, perhaps because at that time a sliver of the Bermuda Triangle was one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north lined up. The Bermuda Triangle is a mythical section of the Atlantic Ocean roughly bounded by Miami, Bermuda and Puerto Rico, where dozens of ships and airplanes have disappeared. Unexplained circumstances surround some of these accidents, including one in which the pilots of a squadron of U.S. Navy bombers became disoriented while flying over the area. The planes were never found. Other boats and planes have seemingly vanished from the area in good weather without even radioing distress messages. But although myriad fanciful theories have been proposed regarding the Bermuda Triangle, none of them prove that mysterious disappearances occur more frequently there than in other well-traveled sections of the ocean. In fact, people navigate the area every day without incident. 1. Napoleon made an important history for France, but in the eyes of the world, he was a short man. Is he really short? The truth is that Napoleon is about 170 centimeters tall. I checked here, Napoleon's true height record, his servant Constel's memoirs record Napoleon's height of 5 feet 2 inches 3 minutes. Napoleon, after his death in the funeral, doctor during the autopsy measured his height, the measurement result is 5 feet 2 inches 4 points. So Napoleon's real height should be around 5 feet 2 inches and 3 minutes. 1 foot is equal to 1.067877 feet, which translates to a Chinese unit of height measurement of about 1 meter 69. Such height was also considered tall at the time, when the average height of French men was 1.65 meters. Why was Napoleon said to be a dwarf? The answer is because he likes to stand with the guards, whose average height is 180 centimeters.